This is the 415ers podcast brought to you by the Odyssey Sports Podcast Network, 95.7 The Game. Mark Grandy, Evan Giddings. Feel free to download, rate, subscribe. We encourage it, actually, and we encourage you to rate us and give us 5 stars because if not, Mark's going to send you a nasty letter. Okay, so if we're talking about Kyle Shanahan and things that he can learn from this game, I also think extrapolating it to the rest of the league, like you mentioned, is something that I would encourage as well. When you play teams that have an advantage and an advantage specifically at the quarterback position like Patrick Mahomes, you do have to adjust, I believe, the way you coach and the way that you manage the clock. And honestly, the way that you do just about everything, because in this type of situation, look, they already have an advantage, Kansas City does, with Patrick Mahomes being their quarterback. You have to coach more aggressively and you have to step out of what you typically do. Because if not, each and every small opportunity that you give Kansas City, or a big one, obviously like 6 points on a fumble scoop and score, they are going to run with. And it turned out to be the difference in this football game. And I think that if you're Kyle Shanahan looking at this, you may see a Kansas City team that you felt like you might have been able to beat. I thought Philly was able to beat this Kansas City team, but it does point to, all right, in playoff time, in crunch time, you almost sometimes have to buck a trend. And if you're Shanahan, whether it's on fourth down, whether it's trying to throw the ball when you typically are running it, whether it's running it when you're typically throwing it, like the teams that are elite in certain spots and have a wild card, a trump card, so to speak, you have to play outside yourself and coach outside yourself. I think that's what we saw. And what we didn't see from Philadelphia was Nick Sirianni being able to I guess, rise to the moment. And again, they only lost by 3 points. Like it wasn't that slim or wasn't that large of a margin. But when I was watching that second half of the game, Mark, I just kept thinking Philly is clinging to this 10-point lead.
Yep.
And after the Chiefs got that opening drive touchdown, it felt like a brand new ball game, and the momentum swung immediately back into Kansas City's favor. And Philly had to do something to distort that. It was clear, like they were panning to the sideline. The Chiefs players were screaming, thumping their chests. We got this. This is our game to win. And it became from Philly's game to lose to Kansas City's game to win. And as we've seen so many times with the Kansas City Chiefs, since they've gotten Patrick Mahomes, they're going to win those games.
Yeah, I don't know how you felt at halftime, but
Not good.
it was 24-14 Philadelphia. By the way, it could have been more. The Eagles, they settled for a field goal attempt. They could have taken a shot to the end zone at the end of the first half. They could have taken a timeout with 7 seconds left. Instead, they let it tick down to 4 seconds left, call the timeout, make the field goal, whatever. But they're up by 10 at halftime. And it felt like they absolutely dominated the first half. It felt like this should be a 14, 17 point lead, but instead it was a 10-point lead. And like
Well,
you said,
it should have been.
yeah, it should have been. Obviously, the fumble was the big play that was returned for a touchdown by Nick Bolton that tied the game up before the Eagles did bounce back and score the final 10 points of the first half. But then, Mahomes and the Chiefs get the ball to start the second half and they go down and score, and suddenly it's a 3-point game. The fact that it was only a 10-point advantage for the Eagles after dominating that first half as much as they did, I think it was credit to Patrick Mahomes, and just the fact that despite the fact that they got outplayed for 30 minutes, they were still in the game. And it was a little bit of a danger sign if I'm the Eagles, feeling how much we outplayed them going into the break and only being up 10, and knowing that Patrick Mahomes is probably going down to get a score to open the second half, making it a one-score game. And if I am, on that coaching staff, if I'm Nick Sirianni, I'm coming out with the same plan, being as aggressive, not trying to cling to a lead. I'm not trying to kill clock. I mean, how many times did the play clock run out and they got flagged? They had to take a penalty or take the timeout. It wasn't the cleanest half for the Eagles after an extremely good first half, aside from one play. credit goes to the Chiefs as well for adjusting, of course. But it did seem like the Eagles were a little content to play from ahead, Evan, and try just to bleed this game out. But that's an extremely dangerous game to play with Patrick Mahomes. That's how he's won both of his Super Bowls now. He's come back from double-digit second half deficits, double-digit point deficits in second halves in both of his Super Bowl wins. So that's not a strategy you should employ against the Chiefs as long as Patrick Mahomes is their quarterback, because you give him enough time, he will score. You just have to keep scoring and keep him at bay. You cannot just try to run out of clock on him.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The two biggest games in which Mahomes has lost, well, I guess 2 out of the 3. The Super Bowl, he got blown out in 2020, but
Yeah.
the conference title game last year against Cincinnati, and then I would say the 2019 conference title game against the Patriots.
Yeah.
Those games, he was actually ahead by double digits. So maybe the strategy is you want to play from behind against Patrick Mahomes, because you do not want to play from ahead, because when he has, it's like a sprinter that has someone in front of him to keep them on pace until the final like 50 yards or 20 yards, and then just bursts out ahead. And once they draw even, you just can't catch them. But yeah, I was, and the other part of it too was, yeah, Patrick Mahomes was incredible. He's the MVP. His fourth quarter was one of the best we've seen in a long time. But he was pretty average the majority of that game, Mark. Like I think he was sitting around $110, $120 heading into the fourth with a score. And one of the touchdowns, honestly, was because of a great punt return. The running game was fantastic for Kansas City. I thought Isaiah Pacheco was incredible. And Travis Kelce had 60 yards in the first quarter, and then I think he had maybe 1 or 2 more catches the rest of the game. Like, he was not as much of a factor as that final stat line would lead you to believe. Like I said, Kansas City won because I thought they were the better defensive team. They obviously had the better quarterback. They were better on special teams, and they made the biggest defensive play of the game, and they won by 3. Like, so putting that all together, again, I thought Philadelphia had a chance to claim that game, but because of what you just mentioned and sort of, I don't know if playing scared is the right way to put it, but clearly they thought that they could just put the ball on the ground and pound it up against Kansas City's front line, and that was not the case. But as far as Mahomes is concerned and the double-digit comebacks, I do think in today's football, it is a little easier to overcome those scores, such as 10 plus than in past years. But obviously, the one before it was against the 49ers. Are you in the camp, Mark, of Patrick Mahomes being the greatest quarterback we've seen? Because that's something I've seen circulating on social media quite a bit.
I'm not so sure if I would say that. He's probably had the best start to a career. First, 5 years as a starter?
Yeah,
Thir-
nobody has done what he's done, I'm pretty sure, in any of the major sports, which is
Yeah.
multiple MVPs, multiple Super Bowl MVPs in your first 5 seasons,
Yeah,
or championship MVPs.
yeah, I know what you meant. I'm super comfortable saying that he's had the best start to a career, not just in the NFL as you said, but across any sport. But to say he's the greatest quarterback is you can't say that yet in my opinion. Maybe he's had if you weren't looking at longevity, but if you were looking at just one season worth, or a peak worth, like who has reached the highest possible level of quarterback play but maybe hasn't necessarily sustained it yet, maybe you can make the case for that yet. But I'm not saying he's the greatest quarterback of all time. He simply doesn't have the length of a career, and as a result all the accomplishments to back that up yet. I do understand what people are saying, and maybe it's more so a singular moment kind of argument, Evan. But as of now, I can't really agree with that. You mentioned comebacks. Do you remember? I think it was the 2020 playoffs. So it was the 2019 regular season, the year the Niners and the Chiefs met in the Super Bowl. There was that divisional round game for Kansas City, their first game
Against Houston?
against Houston, when they got down like 25 points in the first half or whatever it was, and then they come back and win by 20.
Yeah,
So
they were down by 20 plus at the end of the first quarter, or like early in the second quarter, and by
yeah,
halftime they either had the lead or it was tied. Like Patrick Mahomes scored 28 points in that second quarter, I want to say, against Deshaun Watson, actually.
Yeah, it was Deshaun Watson. You're right. So I think that just further adds to your point. If you are going to beat the Chiefs, do not get out to a lead, a double-digit lead, because that'll just ignite Patrick Mahomes, Kelsey, and the rest of that Chiefs offense. And then, I mean, I don't think we talked a lot about their defense in the second half. The Eagles were still scoring, but the Kansas City defense stood tall and forced some field goal attempts, one to close the first half, although that wasn't really much of a stop. That was just time running out. And then they did force a field goal in the second half as well. Of course, the Eagles did get that one touchdown and 2-point conversion to tie the game in the fourth quarter. But the Kansas City Chiefs defense was a lot better in the second half as well. But I do think part of that also goes back to Nick Sirianni's I don't know, lack of aggression a little bit in that second half. But I think the Chiefs defense still deserves a little bit of credit for that as well.
Yeah, no, they do. But I will say on that field goal, I was watching with a group of people who were saying, take the points, go up by 6. And
I expected them to go for it.
that spelled danger to me. Like, even if you didn't think they should go for it, that has danger written all over it because Kansas City was not getting stopped in the second half. You're not getting that ball back with the lead is the issue here. And for those, arguing it was 4th and 6, it was a little long. They went for it on 4th and 5 from further out towards midfield earlier in the game. That's when Jalen Hurts had that 20-plus yard run up the seam. Like, they had proven already in that game that they could convert a play like that. And then later on the 4th and 2, backed up deep in their own territory. I mean, I get that's a situation where you don't necessarily want to end the game there because if you don't get it, you're probably in trouble. Kansas City's going to score. But again, with the way that offense is moving, you're not getting the ball back unless you're down 8 or 7 or 9. Like, that to me is where I get you can't coach, like your defense is going to get blown out of the water. But if you're an opposing coach, you have to see that at one point, this is a machine on the other side. And what did they do in the first half that aided the effort of suppressing Patrick Mahomes? They kept him off the field. That's really the only way to stop him and this Kansas City offense. Because once they build up momentum, it was, in my opinion, it was over. So those 2 4th down calls, I think, were poor decisions, should you say, by Nick Sirianni. When it comes to Patrick Mahomes, yeah, I'm with you. These are the greatest 5 years potentially of any American athlete ever. I cannot say he is the greatest quarterback of all time yet. I think he is on that pace, and I think he has some more work to do. I don't think he's either the second best quarterback of all time, Mark. If I had to rank my current quarterbacks, there's a clear number 3. It is Patrick Mahomes. Number 2 is Joe Montana. Number 1 is Tom Brady. The amount of Super Bowls matters, and the record in Super Bowls, I think, also does matter as it pertains to Joe Montana, who is, of course, undefeated at 4-0. Patrick Mahomes, I believe, will pass both of the quarterbacks ahead of him at some point. He is on pace to do so, and I don't see any team, any other quarterback passing him up.
Wait, when you say he will pass the 2 quarterbacks above him, do you mean simply in your greatest quarterback of all time ranking or in Super Bowl wins?
Both.
He's going to get more than Tom Brady in Super Bowl wins.
Yeah, because I think he's going to be in that big game enough to have a chance to do that. Like
I feel like that's a crazy hot take, and it's nothing against Patrick Mahomes. It's just how can you get a career as perfect and long as Tom Brady's? You could get to the game as many times as Tom Brady, but you could just run into bad luck and not win it as many times. I mean, I don't know. I think ultimately he retires and we have the conversation and probably most people agree that you could call him the greatest quarterback of all time. But I think the argument for Tom Brady will still be that he won more Super Bowls. I'm not sure we will ever see another quarterback win as many Super Bowls as Tom Brady.
That could be true. That the odds are probably better in that favor. I also think that Patrick Mahomes is the greatest talent at quarterback, and that's why people are having this conversation. Because before him, look, people are having the conversation of, is Aaron Rodgers a better quarterback than Tom Brady? And he's only had one Super Bowl, because Aaron Rodgers, in my opinion, before Patrick Mahomes, was the greatest talent at quarterback I have ever seen. I never got to see Marino or any other of the greats who didn't, I guess, win the amount of Super Bowls that people expected them to. But Aaron Rodgers is the best I'd seen. And then Mahomes is Aaron Rodgers, but he doesn't play scared. Like, Aaron Rodgers plays scared in some big games. Mahomes does not. And I know we haven't mentioned the injury at this point. I do think there's a reason for that. And that is, in my opinion, Mark, he didn't look injured. Like, he looked about as 100% as possible. I know there's the moment where he gets rolled up on and you're wondering, is he going to have to come out to Philadelphia, take out another quarterback? 49ers fans are getting PTSD. There was a moment there, but when Mahomes ran away from 3 defensive linemen with about 2:30 left in the fourth quarter, in my mind, the whole injury surrounding story, however severe it was, clearly not severe enough to stop him from outrunning grade A, class 1 athletes. And that doesn't take anything away from the performance. Maybe some people will look back at that and see it, it's his flu game or whatever you want to call it. But I'm judging Patrick Mahomes based on what he did, which is dominate, in my opinion, the best defense that I had seen this year. And he'd also dominated literally the number 1 defense in San Francisco earlier this year on the road. He's incredible. I don't think he's top 2 yet, because I still have Montana ahead of him. But I think that he's on his way. Like, I don't see anybody beating this dude in the next 10 years. Not that he's going to win 10 straight Super Bowls, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
I don't know. I think that's what you said. I don't know.
he has been in the conference championship every single year he has been the starting quarterback. That's incredible. And to say that he will not make the next 5 conference championships, I think depends solely on injury. Because the other part of this too is Mahomes takes up the most cap space of a Super Bowl winning quarterback now ever. So they have proven that even after a rookie deal, even after giving this guy $500 million over the next some years, that they can still retool and win Super Bowls. I don't know, Mark.
Well, I mean,
Don't write it off.
They're certainly at the level of kind of like the Brady peak Patriots dynasty, where you're just like, all right, pencil them into the conference title game. Like, we know they'll be there. And then it's just a question of, can they win 2 big games? Because we're assuming that they're going to get the bye. They're going to win in the first round, their first game, the divisional round. They'll host the AFC Championship game. Can someone come in and upset them? 2 years ago, the Bengals were up to the task. They did it. This past season, they weren't up to the task, and the Chiefs got it done, and the Super Bowl champ. So I'm with you in that you kind of just assume that they're going to be there in the final 4 of the playoffs year in and year out. But it is still incredibly tough to win 2 games against really good teams in the postseason. You certainly have a great advantage if you are at home and if you have someone like Patrick Mahomes. So I'm with you. They do feel like that kind of dynasty already. Maybe saying already isn't even fair, because you said they've been now to the AFC title game 5 straight seasons every year that Mahomes has been their quarterback. But it does still feel like they have so much more ahead of them because of Mahomes and because of his general youth. So I'm with you. This is the team of the 2020s. There's no doubt about it. They should probably get a couple more trophies before this decade is up over the next handful of years. But weird things can happen. Things can change quickly in the NFL. They're probably the best situated team to do it moving forward, just because, as you mentioned, they have already proven that they can do it outside of a rookie deal for their quarterback. And some of the other teams in the AFC, like the Buffalo Bills and the Cincinnati Bengals, they have yet to show us that they can do it once they do give their quarterbacks those epic contracts. Josh Allen obviously is making a lot of money now as well, and not saying Joe Burrow is making a little, but they have yet to prove that they can get to that spot in the postseason when half of their salary cap is tied up on one player. So we'll see how they are able to manage that moving forward. But I don't think you'll find any argument from anyone that Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs are the team to to probably control this decade in the NFL.
Let me alter my previous prisoner of the moment statement. As long as Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are together, I believe that there is no number of Super Bowls they cannot win. I also
And
don't know if Andy Reid is going to be around for that long, but that is what I would say because as I was thinking, Mark, a massive reason, of course, Tom Brady is in all of those conference championships and all of those Super Bowls is the head coach that he is going to be linked with until the end of time.
yeah, no, you're right. That's a good point. And I know there were kind of some rumors about he was undecided. Andy Reid was if he'd come back next year for the 2023 regular season. I know. I think Terry Bradshaw, who did the award ceremony for Fox, asked him, and he, shrugged it off like, "Oh yeah, no, I'll be back, of course." By the way, did you hear that full exchange between Terry Bradshaw and Andy Reid? First,
After the
first,
game, no, I took off pretty quick from the party I
yeah,
was at.
after the game. So Terry Bradshaw is talking with Mahomes, I think, or maybe it was the owner, whoever it was. He then waves him off and brings Andy Reid over, and he says, "All right, Big Red, waddle on over here." He tells him to
Oh
waddle on
yeah,
over here,
should have
and
said that to Mahomes. Mahomes waddles more than Reid does.
true. And then at the end, and I know this is kind of an Andy Reid staple. I think after games he'll go and eat a cheeseburger or whatever. That's just what he does.
There
Uh
were props on that.
yeah.
Like what brand of fast food is Andy Reid going to be eating at the end of the Super Bowl?
But to sign off in the interview saying bye, Terry Bradshaw says, "All right, big guy, go have a cheeseburger on us." Okay, Terry. Like, I don't know if
Can
you're being a little insensitive or you're just having fun. I don't know what's going on here, but it's not the greatest look.
Kangol Terry Bradshaw is a different kind of Bradshaw. I'll say that for sure.